And to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello and welcome to Alastair Stewart and Friends. I'm Dominic Frisby. I'm standing in for Alastair today, and for the next 2 hours I'll be keeping you company on TV and radio with the stories that really matter all over the country. Plenty coming up this afternoon, and of course we'll be continuing to keep you updated with the ongoing unrest, is a mild way of putting it, in Ukraine. And we start with the news from Rhiannon Jones.
Good afternoon, it's 1 minute past 12. Here are the top stories from the GB newsroom. Kharkiv's governor says Ukraine is still in full control of its second largest city after Russian forces entered early this morning. Intensive rocket artillery exchanges overnight have been followed by heavy fighting in the area. In Kiev, Ukrainians engaged with Russian-backed forces for the second night in a row. That as Russian troops prioritise encircling the capital. The Ukrainian president announced the country setting up a foreign legion to bring in volunteers from abroad. Volodymyr Zelensky said the night had been brutal, with shelling of civilian buildings. He's calling for Russia to be stripped of its seat at the United Nations Security Council.
They are fighting against everyone. They are fighting against all living beings, against kindergartens, residential buildings, against ambulances. They use rocket artillery, missiles in city districts where there are not, and never were, any military facilities.
Volodymyr Zelensky there. 368,000 Ukrainians have already fled for Poland, Moldova and other neighbouring countries. The United Nations is warning the number could grow to 4 million if fighting escalates further. Prime Minister Boris Johnson's confirmed the UK will take refugees fleeing the war. He's also praised the Ukrainians' bravery.
Things are not going all the way of President Putin. Very far from it. The Ukrainians are fighting heroically and in some places with great success, as many of us thought they would, because they're a great country and a very brave country. But as you rightly point out, there are some terrible atrocities being committed, and there will be some very grim days ahead for Ukraine.
Anyone who provides aid to a country aimed against Russia could be convicted for treason in the country with a maximum sentence of 20 years. That's according to the Russian state prosecutor. The Deputy Defence Minister for Ukraine says Russia's lost around 4,300 men so far in the invasion, as well as 146 tanks and 26 helicopters. Irina Desipio, president of the Revived Soldiers of Ukraine, a US charity organising aid, says even though Ukrainian civilians are fighting troops with their bare hands, the invasion will incur big Russian losses. The Ukrainian president says he's ready for peace talks with Russia, but not in Belarus, because it served as a staging ground for the invasion. The Kremlin says a Russian delegation, including military officials and diplomats, has arrived in the Belarusian city of Gomel for talks with Ukrainian officials. President Zelensky has suggested other locations, such as Istanbul and Budapest. Russian oligarchs are the latest targets of sanctions by the UK as the Foreign Secretary Liz Truss prepares what she calls a hit list. The UK and other Western allies have agreed to disconnect selected Russian banks from SWIFT, the international banking messaging system. It'll help prevent Russia from conducting most of its financial transactions worldwide. Vicky Price from the Centre of Economics and Business Research told GB News the move could inflict a crippling economic blow on Moscow.
It will be painful for Russia, without any doubt. I mean, Russia is dependent on those exports in order to distribute the money, if you like, to the population and keep them happy. Something like 40% of all the tax revenues that Russia collects come from oil and gas, for example. I mean, that's huge. If any of that is disrupted, then, you know, there are question marks as to how do you continue with funding the military or anything else.
Here in the UK, police forces in England and Wales have recorded the highest numbers of rapes since Sarah Everard's murder almost a year ago. The Office for National Statistics also recorded the second highest number of sexual offences since April last year. Miss Everard was killed by serving Met Officer Wayne Couzens in South London in March last year. And rail firms are ramping up services that had been cancelled due to COVID. Avanti West Coast and East Midlands Railway are bringing back lines cut in December and January. For those coming to London, North Wales and Chester will get a second daily service to and from the capital. And trains from Manchester and Birmingham to Euston will be doubled from Monday. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens now. It's back to Alastair Stewart and friends with Dominic Frisby.
Thank you, Rhiannon. Coming up this afternoon on Alastair Stewart and Friends, Ukrainians woke up today to a fourth day of Russian attacks. I'll be joined in the studio to discuss the latest with Conservative commentator Calvin Robinson and political journalist George Brzezinski. And the world of sport has come together to condemn Russia. The Russian owner of Chelsea Football Club, Roman Abramovich, has handed over stewardship of the club. Meanwhile, the club have sent their thoughts to everyone in the Ukraine. There's been plenty more reaction from other sports clubs too, and we'll be covering that. And before 2 p.m, I'll be joined by the chair of the Commons Defence Select Committee, Tobias Ellwood, to get the very latest on the invasion in Ukraine and what we can do here in the UK to support them, that is, the Ukrainians, not the Russians, of course. As always, I want to hear from you. Email me at gbviews@gbnews.uk. We're also on Twitter and Facebook. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. So today we focus again on the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Heavy fighting is underway in Ukraine's second city, Kharkiv, as Russian troops entered the city in the early hours of Sunday morning. Major attacks overnight included a gas pipeline outside Kharkiv that was set ablaze by Russian troops and an oil depot in Vasilkiv near Kiev that was destroyed by a Russian missile strike. Toxic fumes from the explosion prompted the Kiev authorities to ask citizens to stay indoors and keep windows shut. In a move labelled propaganda by Kiev, the Kremlin claimed Russian delegates had arrived in Belarus for peace talks with Ukrainian officials. Ukraine's President, Volodymyr Zelensky, said he was ready for discussions, but rejected the offer to hold them in Belarus, calling it a staging ground for the invasion of Ukraine. So today I'm joined by Conservative commentator Calvin Robinson and journalist and political commentator George Brzezinski. They'll be here for the whole programme as we try and make some sense of the ongoing situation in the Ukraine. And I'm also joined by sports journalist and broadcaster Aideen McGee. We'll come to Aideen in just a minute. I want to start with you, George, if I may. And the overwhelming feeling that we've got from the front pages of the newspapers today, and also, I guess, from social media, is the, I want to say, surprising resilience. I guess it's not surprising if your country's being invaded, but the resilience of the Ukraine. It's not been quite the pushover that perhaps Vladimir Putin was hoping for.
Yes, exactly. I've been waking up every day since the last few days, checking my phone, which cities could have been lost, how many people died, are my friends alive, and the strongholds, the key cities are still there. It's a miracle. They've been fighting for over 82 hours. The resistance is incredible. The bravery of those people on the ground, it's something we haven't seen in at least in a long while. The Russians have an enormous army. It's one of the strongest armies that has been trained. It has participated in conflicts in Syria, for example. These are not just stationed soldiers. They have been very successful in a number of military conflicts. But the Ukrainians are fighting with a higher morale. As we may have seen, there are young Russians that are being sent at the front and captured at 20 years old sometimes. They haven't even been told they're participating in a war. They thought this is just an exercise. But the Ukrainians Ukrainians have nothing to lose. They're fighting for their women, for their children, for their families. And I've read that tweet from a Ukrainian ambassador to Germany, and he said that he spoke to one German diplomat a few days ago and asked for aid, and that German diplomat told him, there is no point to send any support to Ukraine because you will collapse in a few hours. That's chilling, that's scary, and it's not true because the Ukrainians are not giving up. They're fighting. They have support from the West. Many of them are fleeing, of course. But it's mostly real refugees. These are women and children that in hundreds of thousands that are now accepted by Poland and other countries. But the men are fighting. I personally know people whose fathers are below 60 years old and they have to take up arms, take up Kalashnikovs. There are pictures on the internet of people holding a box with a cat in one hand, a goldfish in a jug of water, and a Kalashnikov in the other hand, protecting their street. So hopefully there will be enough Western support for them.
Were the Russians... Do we know what the Russian plan was? Do we know if the Russians were expected to have made better ground than this by this point?
I think, well, to begin with, we were duped by Russia and the West. They said there would be no full-scale invasion. Perhaps Donetsk and Lugansk could have been taken. I think many experts rose that, but not the full-scale invasion that we are seeing now. The Russians did not predict this. They're losing, according to various sources, at least 20 billion per day. The war is very costly on them. They've lost a lot of soldiers. Their morale is very low because the Russians are not understanding why that conflict have to take place. It's a very different one propaganda story to protect the pro-Russian minorities in eastern Ukraine to taking over a whole country, killing civilians, wiping out whole areas. And we've seen there were kindergartens that had missiles aimed at them, civilian buildings. It's just a horror, and the world is standing by. But I'm increasingly positive because even those countries such as Germany and Italy that were at the beginning blocking stronger sanctions, and I cannot even believe that this happened, but the Italians were trying to find exceptions for their luxury goods to be sent to Russia while there are people dying in hundreds and thousands. But luckily, they were all convinced they should back much tougher sanctions, and the world really needs to tell Mr. Putin, this is your end if you won't stop right now.
I find that incredible, Calvin, that invading troops didn't even know they were invading. I guess that's what happened. I mean, I can't believe the chain of communication is that bad, but if you're to orchestrate an army of that size, you need good communications. But if you're trying to control the propaganda war, particularly at home, then I guess that's what happened. The communication breaks down.
Well, the fighting from the armies is one thing, but I'm more interested or fascinated in the fighting of the civilians. The people that are picking up arms in Ukraine and fighting for their homeland, as you rightly just mentioned, is fantastic to see. I just imagine if that happened over here, what would we see? You know, let me just tell you about my pronouns would be the argument. We wouldn't have people picking up Kalashnikovs and creating Molotov cocktails, would we? The stoicism and the resilience of the people to defend their homeland.
Well,
is
it's marvellous, and you look to historical examples, and, you know, the army of the early Roman Republic was voluntary. And, you know, it was one of the most brilliant armies in history. And then the army of the late Roman Empire was conscripted, and it was pretty woeful. And so you look at the conscripted Russian army and the voluntary, if you like, Ukrainian army, and you know which is going to be the more motivated.
Absolutely. And you rightly mentioned as well the war of propaganda. And so far already, so I've been keeping a very cynical eye on what the mainstream media has been purporting. So far, we've seen a picture of a wounded old lady that was actually caused by a gas explosion in 2014. We've seen Zelensky in combat uniform. That was actually a photograph of 2021, not this year. And we've seen a Ukrainian pilot shooting down a Russian aircraft that was actually from a video game called Arma 3. So we're seeing lots of propaganda on both sides of the debate being pushed out there. It's very, very difficult to find out what's actually happening and what's actually true, because the mainstream media is peddling rubbish, and social media is obviously very difficult to navigate.
It is difficult to navigate, but what is extraordinary about this war compared to any other war in history? I've often ventured a theory that if we had smartphones in World War I, World War I could never have gone on for the extent that it did, because all the horrors in the trenches would have been broadcast to the world via social media, and the population would have just gone, no, that's too much. In many ways, this is one of the first wars where we've seen the role of mobile phones in the war, and we're seeing all this incredible social media footage from the Ukraine, you know, villagers standing up to people with tanks and so on. But you're also seeing this weird kind of banter. I saw that there was one footage of a load of tanks that had run out of petrol, and there was a Ukrainian guy just driving by all the tanks, just sort of bantering with the Russian troops. That seems extraordinary, George. I don't know if you've seen that video.
Yes, I have. But I just wanted to comment or maybe correct something that Calvin just said about the propaganda and fake news from both sides. So it is true that there are fake news from Ukraine and from Russia, but we should not be comparing the two, because whether Zelensky was in a military uniform yesterday or it's an old video, it doesn't actually matter, because we have him making live videos from his palace, from the center of Kiev, where he stands with the key people from his government and is on the ground. Many people criticized him in the past years. He was maybe not as popular as he used to be before the conflict started, but now he's seen as a national hero because he has not fled. We know a conflict where many leaders would just hide in the bunkers, but the Ukrainians are all out there.
The Afghanistan leader fled, didn't he?
Yes, absolutely. And Vitaly Klitschko, we have him in Kiev, not fled. Many could have just escaped, saved their families. They're millionaires. They have ways to escape, but they're out there fighting. So, of course, there is fake news from both sides that we should take into consideration. But if you turn on Russia Today, and I had a look yesterday, it just says that they're getting rid of fascists and helping people. And many ordinary Russians are unfortunately believing in that.
OK, thank you, George. Thanks, Calvin. I'm just going to bring in Aidan McGee, our sports reporter, or sports journalist, Aidan McGee. And Aidan, welcome to the programme. Let's talk about Chelsea and what's just happened with Abramovich. But before we come to that, let's do Czech Republic and the World Cup. What's happened there?
Yeah, so that's emerged in the last couple of hours or so. Czech Republic became the third nation to declare that they wouldn't be going to any World Cup playoff. They were due to play against Sweden, one of the three countries have said they're not going to go on March 24th. It was due to be a playoff. Now, OK, they're not playing Russia right now, but if they win that, what's effectively a semi-final on March the 24th, there is a possibility that they could face the winner of Russia against Poland. There's a lot of supposition here because obviously Russia have to win their game and they've got a very tough game against Poland, but Russia could, in theory, face the Czech Republic in a final.
The Poland game isn't going ahead either, though, is it?
No, it's not. That's what I mean. Well, it's not. It could go ahead, but it's not going to go ahead. It's not going to go ahead in Russia. There might be a plan B. We don't know yet. UEFA haven't decided on that. It looks in all likelihood as if Russia is just going to be expelled from the whole thing.
Yeah, we talk about the propaganda war, and imagine if England did something and we got banned from the World Cup, there'd be a national outrage. That would unify the country, Calvin. But I mean, if Russia gets banned from the World Cup, they can't hide that from the Russian people, and they're going to be pretty unhappy about it, I would have thought.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, just look at the range of Russia's financial influence within sport. They've achieved next to nothing in the last 20 years in terms of in the field of play. OK, I can think of Daniel Medvedev winning the US Open tennis last September. It's a hell of an achievement for Russia. I can think of Zenit St. Petersburg winning the 2008 UEFA Cup. Beyond that, there isn't much there. Most of the achievements in athletics have been discredited by the fact that most of the participants were subjected to a state-sponsored doping scheme, which has therefore been called out since then. And obviously Russia have to compete under the auspices of the Russian Olympic Committee. So they've not done very much. But if you look at the influence financially, you've got Chelsea run by Roman Abramovich since 2003. He's plunged £1.5 billion into that club. You've got the World Cup in 2018. You've got an F1 event taking place in Sochi, or due to take place in September, which has now been cancelled. You think back to Sochi in the Winter Olympics. How on earth were they awarded that event? They've held Champions League finals back in 2008. They were due to hold a Champions League final last year. They were due to hold it this year. So their tentacles, financially at least, are all over sport, and that's why UEFA had to think very carefully about severing their ties. And that's why they deserve a degree of credit, because UEFA get a lot of criticism. But despite all their financial tie-ups, and they always maintain that their deals are with individual companies, not with the states, they did act quite quickly and decisively.
OK, let's talk Abramovich. What's gone on then? What's happened there?
Well, he released a statement last night saying he was relinquishing the stewardship of Chelsea Football Club. Now, the stewardship, that word is chosen carefully.
Yeah, I'll say.
When a club is that big, and it's not like selling shares, you can't just sell them within 24 hours. It's not like selling a lollipop to somebody and getting 5p or whatever. You can't just do that. This is a multi-billion-pound organisation. It's a huge club with international reputation and profile. He can't just walk away from it. So he's put it in the hands of a charitable foundation. That was a charitable foundation within the club that he set up in 2010, mainly to smooth off the rough edges of the Abramovich image, really. I mean, he'd already proven himself in terms of business and politics and...
Can he take back stewardship if he wants?
Oh, without doubt. Yeah, of course he can. It's his club. I mean,
so
he can
it's
still
just a nominal...
It's a nominal...
And presumably he can sack the manager if he decides.
Well, Marina Granovskaya, who is the chief executive officer, also a Russian, she remains in control of player transfers, player contracts and the future of the coach. So nothing much changes. I just think that if the UK government are going to subject Roman Abramovich to sanctions, he wants to make sure the club are protected from that. That's much more difficult for the club to win that PR battle when it's going through a charitable foundation.
So this is more of a PR thing. He's acted early, he's acted decisively. He's sort of manoeuvred the situation very well.
I can't see why else he would do that. I mean, he doesn't. It's not going to make much difference to the running of the club. I mean, November was his first trip to the club in 3 years. We know that he was subjected to his pathway into the UK was made a little bit more difficult in the aftermath of the Salisbury poisonings back in 2018. So his relationship with the UK government is a little bit hostile. I think this may be the end of his relationship with the UK government. Who knows whether it's going to be the end of the Roman Empire? I know you're a comedian. I thought you might.
You're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and Friends. I'm Dominic Frisby, standing in for Alastair today. Lots more still to come. We'll continue to keep you updated with all the ongoings in Ukraine as the conflict continues. And after the break, we are going to talk to a political analyst evacuated from Kiev to Germany about the imminent refugee crisis. But first, let's take a look at the weather.
Looking ahead to this afternoon, the UK is looking dry for many this lunchtime, although some rain will affect the far west. Let's take a look at the details. In the southwest, many places will be dry with some sunshine. Parts of Cornwall and West Devon will be cloudier with perhaps the odd spot of rain. Heading over to the southeast of England and East Anglia, apart from a little fair weather cloud, it'll be dry with plenty of sunshine. Western Wales will tend to see more in the way of cloud this afternoon, but East Wales and the Midlands will be dry and sunny. A little cloud may move into Irish Sea coast from time to time, otherwise lots of sunshine this afternoon across northwest England. It'll be breezy though, especially over the hills and fells. The breeze will also be noticeable along the North Sea coast, which will make it feel rather chilly, sheltered from the wind inland, and in the sunshine, though, it'll feel fairly pleasant. Heading into Scotland and southern and eastern areas should see a largely sunny afternoon. Elsewhere, though, it will be cloudier with some rain across the northwest, winds also strengthening in the far west. Across into Northern Ireland and skies should begin to brighten this afternoon, especially towards the west. Many places will be dry, although the odd spot of rain is still possible. This evening will remain dry and clear in the east, but further cloud and rain will begin to spread into the west. And that's how the weather's shaping up for the rest of the day.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. It is 12:26. You're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and Friends. I'm Dominic Frisby, standing in for Alastair today, who is taking some no doubt well-deserved time off. And all of our focus is, of course, on events as they unfold in Ukraine. In the last hour, Ukraine's Deputy Defence Minister, Hanna Maliar, has claimed Russian forces have lost about 4,300 servicemen. However, the scale of the claims gives insight into the possible humanitarian cost of Russia's aggression. My next guest, a resident of Kiev who managed to get to safety. He joins me now to tell his incredible story of how he escaped. He is political analyst Mattia Nellis. Mattia was working in Kiev. He's been evacuated. Hello, Mattia. Where are you now?
I'm in Düsseldorf. Hello.
Hi, and tell us about the evacuation. How did you get there?
Well, I have to say I'm privileged because my wife and I, we were evacuated ahead of time. So we were escaping the wave of refugees. We were already evacuated about 2 weeks ago, together with our dog. So we are in Western Germany in safety, and we are privileged to be here, unlike our friends, family, and colleagues who are scattered around Ukraine and who remain in the middle of combat zones.
And are you able to communicate with them? Are phone lines and internet, is everything working?
Yes, we are in close contact with everyone. And this is remarkable about this war. You know, every morning begins with a checkup of the friends who are remaining in Kharkiv, in Kiev, or in other parts of Ukraine to see how they are, how the fighting there is. And just last night, my parents-in-law spent all of the night in a bomb shelter. So this is communication lines remain open, but the situation remains extremely dire.
And tell us about the situation in Germany. How much is Germany helping? I gather the Chancellor Scholz made a statement earlier today.
Yes, Germany in general is a very strong supporter of Ukraine. There was a big wave of solidarity coming out of all the German cities that I've seen, from Berlin, from Düsseldorf, from Cologne, all over Germany, Munich, but just as we saw in London or Paris, around the world. But with regards to Germany's help, Germany was the biggest financial supporter of Ukraine before Russia's war of aggression, and they announced yesterday that they would step up, supply bazookas and Stinger anti-aircraft weapons and further military support for Ukraine. And of course, that can only be the beginning, because the needs are so big that Ukraine needs all hands on deck.
And I gather in Poland, you know, ordinary families are opening up their houses and so on. Is something similar happening in Germany? I mean, who are you actually staying with? Are you staying with friends, or where are you staying?
I'm staying with my parents, but I know of many friends and many communities here, municipalities in Germany who are preparing to take in refugees. Most of the people fleeing the war in Ukraine are just passing over the borders. I don't have the most recent numbers, but as of last night, there were more than 150,000 who crossed the border, who fled the war of Ukraine. Most of them remain in Poland and Romania as of now, but we can prepare ourselves, brace ourselves for potentially millions, up to 4 million minimum of refugees coming to Europe as the war progresses.
4 million, I mean, that's just so many. It's almost an unimaginable number. That's just so many people. Have you been impressed by, I mean, impressed isn't the right word. Have you been proud by the reaction of the Ukrainians, the fight that they've taken to the Russians, the defence of their nation that they've shown?
Yes, Dominic, this has been a up and down in emotions. We see the videos, the incredible stories of Ukrainian civilians. You talked about some of that, resisting with their bare hands, advancing tanks, and basically resisting the Russian advance. So what amazes me is the reaction of the Ukrainian people as a whole, their willingness to fight back and stand up in the face of an overwhelmingly strong adversary. Their opponent is waging a war of aggression, and we fear a war possibly of extermination of the Ukrainian statehood. And in that face of this enemy, the Ukrainians are united and mobilized to an extent that we simply cannot imagine.
And can you tell me, I've been hearing about sabotage, especially in Kiev, Russians disguising themselves as Ukrainians and then committing sabotage. Are you able to talk about that?
Of course, it's public. A lot of saboteurs were caught. So there's different stories about artillery or airstrike planning that was reported about. There's some questions about that, but saboteurs have been caught by the Ukrainian police, by the Ukrainian territorial defense units, and by the vigilance of the residents. Just last night, a friend saw a suspicious drone in her neighborhood, called the police, and they were chasing down this questionable drone. So the whole population remains vigilant, and there are saboteurs around. Just 5 minutes before the show, I was seeing videos from my street in Kiev where special forces were trying to hunt down saboteurs. So this is very real, and this is why the curfew is in place, and residents are asked in Kiev and other cities now, even during the day, not to leave their apartments, because the police and others are hunting down saboteurs or Russian special forces which are in the city center of Kiev and other cities.
I see. And now, I mean, how do you tell a saboteur? Is the accent very different to the saboteurs trying to do Ukrainian accents? I know that sounds like a ridiculous question, but, you know, you can normally tell where somebody's from when they speak.
Absolutely.
As a people, they look very similar. Well, you look very similar, Russians and Ukrainians. You're pretty much the same people.
Well, I have to say I'm German, so but my wife is Ukrainian, and I worked in Ukraine for a long time, so I feel with the Ukrainian they're suffering. But how people are trying to identify saboteurs is very simple. First of all, suspicious behavior, right? And second of all, they do ask even the uniformed man. And speak in Ukrainian to them, and no Russian speaks, or very few Russians, not the kind of saboteurs that they sent to Ukraine, speak sufficient Ukrainian. So that's very suspicious. And even if people wear Ukrainian uniforms, they are asked by civilians to identify themselves and to provide evidence that they are really part of the Ukrainian armed forces or part of the state.
OK, Mattia, thank you very much. We wish you and your family all the best, and take care and come and speak to us again. Thank you very much. That was Mattia Nellis, a political analyst evacuated from Kiev, now in Germany. You're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and Friends with me, Dominic Frisby. Plenty more still to come this afternoon, including our Rural Spotlight segment. This week we're discussing how the conflict is affecting the farming industry in Britain. But first, we go to the news with Rhiannon Jones.
Thank you, Dominic. It's 12:34. Here are the top stories from the GB newsroom. Kharkiv's governor says Ukraine is still in full control of its second largest city after Russian forces entered early this morning. Intensive rocket artillery exchanges overnight have been followed by heavy fighting in the area. President Volodymyr Zelensky said Ukrainian forces were holding off Russian troops advancing on the capital, Kyiv. Volodymyr Zelensky said the night had been brutal with shelling of civilian buildings. He's setting up a foreign legion to bring in volunteers from abroad. An oil terminal has been set ablaze after Russian missiles hit the town of Vasilkiv, southwest of the capital. Authorities have warned residents to be on alert for toxic fumes. Russian-backed separatists in Ukraine's Luhansk province claim an oil terminal's been blown up by a Ukrainian missile in the town of Ravenki. 368,000 Ukrainians have already fled for Poland, Moldova and other neighbouring countries. The United Nations is warning the number could grow to 4 million if fighting escalates further. Prime Minister Boris Johnson's confirmed the UK will take refugees fleeing the war. The Ukrainian president says he's ready for peace talks with Russia, but not in Belarus, as it served as a staging ground for the invasion. The Kremlin says a Russian delegation arrived in the Belarusian city of Gomel for talks as Ukraine declined. The G7 leaders have declared they will cut off certain Russian banks from SWIFT, the international banking messaging system. It'll help prevent Russia from conducting most of its financial transactions worldwide. TV online and DAB Plus Radio, this is GB News. We'll have a full update for you at the top of the hour. It's back to Alastair Stewart and friends with Dominic Frisby in just a moment.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. It is 12:38. You're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart on Friends on GB News with me, Dominic Frisby, standing in for Alastair today. Now, for those who live in towns and cities, it can be easy to lose touch with what's going on in the countryside and the world of farming and agriculture. So each week we check in with those at the forefront of rural communities. And Russian fertiliser imports accounted for 22% of our total fertiliser imports in 2020, according to CSO data, and as much as 40% of global fertiliser supply. Since the beginning of this month, Russia banned ammonium nitrate exports, while gas prices have also continued to rise, and the knock-on effect has caused fertiliser prices to hit levels never seen before. With Russian trade sanctions and political unrest ongoing, what are the long-term consequences going to be? I'm joined by Bruce Jobson. Bruce is an agricultural journalist and a ninth-generation farmer. Bruce, hello, whereabouts are you in the world?
Well, we're in sunny Northumberland today. Dominic, thanks for the invite on the show. I watch your other shows. But basically, what we're going to see is a catastrophic effect. We predicted this on this very show and with Liam on his show. As you quite rightly pointed out, Russia is the largest exporter of ammonium nitrate, and the ban came in February. But the prices had already increased by 110% before this February ban. Now, I phoned around some firms on Friday, frantically, three are the biggest in the country, and nobody would answer my calls. Nobody would give me a price. Nobody returned my calls. So we're going to see the price of fertilizer increase again. You cannot get it. But we predicted this a few weeks ago on the show, and I want to give an example of what is going to happen. There's a fantastic firm not far over the border, up the road at Fife, and they're called East of Scotland Growers. And they have cut back vegetable production. They announced this 2 weeks ago by, I think it is 26%, because they are unable to carry the costs of production. Diesel fuel has gone up by 55%, labour's gone up by 11%, and all the costs of producing crops has increased massively. And I was just looking at some costings, and one of the ones is this, is that the sale prices have increased more in literally the past 6 months than what's happened in the past 16 years. Sadly, the British consumer, you could say in the old money, the British housewife is going to have to suffer the cost of this because food prices are going to rocket. And we also have the grain side of things. As you said, Russia, the largest exporter of wheat, as is Ukraine, one of the biggest. Now, you've got the two biggest players. In my opinion, Putin's after the heat and the gas, and he's also trying to control the wheat. And when that happens, he's trying to strangle all the markets here. Forget the military side of things and focus on the farming side of things. But all this will have a catastrophic effect.
There's the grains, there's the energy, there's also the metals. Ukraine, I think, is one of the world's largest iron ore exporters as well. I want to ask you, when there's a shortage of some essential commodity, one of the big arguments is how long it takes to get replacement supply there. You know, are there any substitutes for ammonia or the other fertilizers, and how long does it take to get them to market?
Well, technically there is, farm manure, if you want to call it that. I know farmers globally who are telling me they're using poultry manure, they're using duck manure. People will be able to use manure on their farms, but you're not going to get the yields. Organic farming is generally 50% lower than what you get by using fertilizers. And we've been able to increase production in this country. But what has happened in this country, Dominic, is that in the 1980s, we were 80% self-sufficient in food production. We're now down to 59%. So we've surrendered that. But if I can take you back to the good old days of North Sea oil, North Sea gas, we were producing our own. And you remember ICI, one of the biggest flagship companies we had, and people like Sir John Harvey Jones, the captains of industry, these people were at the forefront. And ICI supply 50% of the UK fertilizer market. So for 20, 40 years, we've kicked the can down the road. We've ignored the investment that we should have done for capacity, but we've also, just recently, Shell's closed down gas production in the North Sea, which would last for 50 years. Now, I can't speak for Shell, but what the Scottish Government needs to do is to get this sorted and get gas on board and get this country effectively able to create its own energy and its own food production and stop relying on imports.
Yes, that's it's kind of inevitable, and a lot of us have been saying we should be doing that for some time. Bruce, it's been a real pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm going to leave you with a statistic that I read about Ukrainian resources, Bruce, because I think you'll like this. Ukraine has enough food supply, or Ukrainian produce could feed 600 million
people. I agree, yes. I've lived a lot on Ukraine, but can I just give you 10, 20 seconds? What happened in 2013, few people know about it, I wrote about this, Dominic, is that China leased 3 million hectares of land from Ukraine under the previous regime, which is roughly the same equivalent size of renting Belgium. This is one of the reasons why China is not coming out and saying anything, because China has 1.4 billion people and they're desperate. But it says, just as we've talked before,
and they're only 2 or 3 days away from the nature of living and the nature of food supplies. They're only sort of 2 or 3 days, in any given moment, we're only 2 and 3 days away from hunger.
Correct. Thank you, Dominic. Much appreciated.
Anytime, Bruce, and pleasure talking to you. That was Bruce Jobson, who is an agricultural journalist, and it's not just the cost of fertiliser. The Russian invasion of Ukraine could have an overall impact on the cost of living here in the UK. Fuel costs, energy bills and the price of groceries could all potentially rise due to Russian sanctions, following over a decade of extremely loose monetary policy and printing money. That does not help at all either. Joining me now is Malcolm Grimstone. Malcolm is a senior research fellow at the Centre for Energy Policy and Technology at Imperial College. Hello there, Malcolm. How are you doing?
Yeah, good to see you.
Good stuff. Now, Malcolm, we've increased taxes on energy to subsidise green energy. We failed to develop domestic supplies. We failed to develop nuclear power. We've closed down coal plants. And now supplies from Russia are being cut off. This is the perfect storm, isn't it?
Yes, it is. I mean, energy goes through this every 30, 40 years or so. The last famous example was the 1970s, where the world had become very dependent, in that case, on imported oil from the Middle East in particular, and the oil price quadrupled in a single year and continued to rise for that decade. And exactly the same argument was said back then. We should have prepared for this better. We got round to building more nuclear stations, reviving the coal industry, and the prices did come down in due course. But the nature of energy is that the investments we're making often have investment horizons of several decades before you get your money back from those investments. But it's all governed by very short-term policies and short-term viewing. When we did close the Rough gas storage plant the previous speaker was mentioning about 5 years ago, it looked like gas was no problem. Prices were low. There was lots of supply around the place. And so at that stage, we thought it wasn't worth putting the money into that storage. 5 years later, things look extremely different. So we will see a response of the world to this, and it'll be sensible. Whether it ultimately changes that mindset that when things look a bit better, we forget how these prices are, that's perhaps a different question.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why tech attracts so much more capital than commodities and mining and oil and gas drilling and so on, is that the return on your money is so much quicker. Let me ask you a question. The recent, do you think the government is going to have to reverse its policy on fracking here in the UK?
I'm sure that's one of the things that the government will look at. We should point out, I mean, the UK doesn't get terribly much gas from Russia. Most of our gas, Norway is the single biggest provider, followed by the United States. It's only about 5% of physical supply that comes from Russia. And of course, even if we produce more of our own, that doesn't necessarily put a lot of downward pressure on prices, because we'll be part of a European gas market, and whoever is fracking the gas, understandably, will want to sell it for the highest price that it can. So gas prices may not reduce particularly. What it would do, though, is give us a bit of extra support on supplies. Now, at the moment, it's more a matter of price than supply that we're worried about, but that needn't be the case in the long term. That won't necessarily be the case in the long term. And of course, from a balance of payments point of view, if we're producing gas for ourselves rather than being very dependent on imports, that helps the current account. So there are other economic benefits. But yes, I think fracking does look a lot more attractive now than it did 2 years ago. I don't think personally that it will be a game changer in terms of gas prices in the UK.
I've got you. Energy, you rightly say energy is cyclical. And you could say that something similar actually happened in 2008 until, you know, the technology of fracking and so on was expanded in North America, if you like, and that brought the oil price down specifically. How long do you think this, you know, stranglehold of high energy prices is going to be with us for, Malcolm?
Well, looking historically, when the oil price reached its first peak in 1979, by 1986, it was coming back to the sort of levels that had been typical before the big oil shocks of the early 1970s. You've mentioned the oil peak in 2008, when actually the oil price was considerably higher than it is today. Today it's hovering just under the $100 a barrel, which is high compared to the last few years. But inflation corrected, it was over $150 a barrel in 2008. And again, those, as long as you don't interfere with the market with things like price caps or windfall taxes, so the market recognises that now is the time to invest, then you do get turnaround. The capacity for fracking in the States is still there. It hasn't been used at full capacity recently because prices have been low, but that's relatively easy to revive, and indeed we're already seeing that. We even before the invasion there, we were seeing a real reappraisal of nuclear power globally, with a lot more countries seeing the benefits of a source of energy that was both low carbon and reliable and not going to require imports from the oil and gas producers. So that's probably going to expand and accelerate. But as I say, there is a mindset issue. It's always the case. How much do you spend on your insurance policy? We should have spent an awful lot more, but 5 years ago it didn't look like that.
I'm inferring, Malcolm, that we've got a good 5 years of high energy prices ahead of us before things start to come down again. We need to change the mindset. We need more investment capital, and it takes a while for all that to filter through into prices at the pump and prices at the boiler, if you like.
Yeah, Malcolm, energy prices are notoriously enormously volatile. So I wouldn't want to put a number on it, but my feeling is to put right some of the fundamentals here, because it's not just about the Ukrainian invasion. This was all happening a month ago. There's a lot that we need to do.
Sorry to interrupt you, Malcolm. Our time is done. It's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much. That was Malcolm Grimstone, Senior Research Fellow at the Centre for Energy Policy and Tech at Imperial College. You're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and Friends. Today with me, Dominic Frisby. Lots more coming up on the show this afternoon, including more on the ongoing situation in the Ukraine. As many head to the borders to flee the unrest, what is it like for those who have found safety already in neighbouring countries? We'll be speaking to someone in Poland shortly. But first, let's take a look at the weather.
Looking ahead to this afternoon, the UK is looking dry for many this lunchtime, although some rain will affect the far west. Let's take a look at the details. In the southwest, many places will be dry with some sunshine. Parts of Cornwall and West Devon will be cloudier with perhaps the odd spot of rain. Heading over to the southeast of England and East Anglia, apart from a little fair weather cloud, it'll be dry with plenty of sunshine. Western Wales will tend to see more in the way of cloud this afternoon, but East Wales and the Midlands will be dry and sunny. A little cloud may move into Irish Sea coast from time to time. Otherwise, lots of sunshine this afternoon across northwest England. It'll be breezy, though, especially over the hills and fells. The breeze will also be noticeable along the North Sea coast, which will make it feel rather chilly, sheltered from the wind inland, and in the sunshine, though, it'll feel fairly pleasant. Heading into Scotland and southern and eastern areas should see a largely sunny afternoon. Elsewhere, though, it will be cloudier with some rain across the northwest, winds also strengthening in the far west. Across into Northern Ireland, and skies should begin to brighten this afternoon, especially towards the west. Many places will be dry, although the odd spot of rain is still possible. This evening will remain dry and clear in the east, but further cloud and rain will begin to spread into the west. And that's how the weather's shaping up for the rest of the day.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. It is 12:55. You're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and Friends on GB News. With me, Dominic Frisby, standing in for Alastair. The United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees have this morning updated its estimate on the number of refugees that have left Ukraine, saying that 368,000 people have escaped Ukraine to neighbouring countries since Thursday. With heavy Russian assaults on the capital of Kiev taking place over the last few days, resulting in entire apartment blocks being hit by cruise missiles and the constant dread of never-ending air raid sirens echoing throughout the city, the number of people fleeing their homes and their city is set to increase dramatically over the coming days. Our next guest is one of those who has had to make the heartbreaking decision of leaving their home behind in Kiev. Anton, welcome to the show, Anton. Where are you talking? Whereabouts in the world are you, Anton?
I'm in Gdansk, Poland right now. Nice to meet you. Thanks for having me on the show, Dominic.
No problem. And how did you get to Gdansk, and where are you? Who are you staying with?
I'm at an Airbnb. I flew here on a direct flight last Sunday night from Lviv on the far west of Ukraine.
I see. And what's the how are you feeling? Are you missing people back home? Are you in contact with people back home? What's going on?
So right now I have just dedicated my life 24 hours a day to helping all my Ukrainian friends. We're hitting back on Russia from every angle possible. For example, I'm involved in cybersecurity. So we have special operations that I can't even talk about right now. I'm organizing evacuations and trying to get as many donations as possible. So all of my Ukrainian friends are sharing all of the best ways to donate. It's obviously a very emotional time for me. I've lived in Kyiv for almost 4 years, and it's the best city in the world. I knew that the first year that I lived there. It captured my heart. It is still the most beautiful city in the world, even though it is a lot of broken streets and apartment buildings. But one thing I'll make clear is that I will go back and help rebuild this city. There is no way that Russia will be able to take it. That's for sure. So I'm just fighting that good online fight right now. And if you sense that there's a little bit of emotion in my voice, it's because this is the most emotional week that I've ever had. So I just want to make it very clear to your viewers that the Ukrainian people are mostly in this fight alone. When you hear about the aid that we're getting, it's not enough by far. We need more ammunition and weapons delivered by anyone in the world. I encourage all of our EU partners, NATO, to every citizen needs to take it to the streets across Russia, across Europe. I know that's happening, but we need bigger numbers and we need to demand more. We need full, swift restrictions. We need to isolate Russia in every single way possible. And to me, it's embarrassing that we haven't done it 100% already. We're taking some incremental steps and it's not enough. And we need action immediately and quickly. And this can come from the average everyday person. I would like to promote some good charities. If you Google Back and Alive, this is an amazing charity, and there's many others. You can also donate via cryptocurrency. I know that Ukrainian army is taking Bitcoin, so there's no excuse not to donate. Donate $1, donate 10 pounds, donate anything you can.
can you tell us, if we want to donate, can you give us a website that we can go to if we want to donate Bitcoin or if we want to donate fiat money? Where do we go?
Check out the Twitter account for Back and Alive. So that's BACKANDALIVE, Back and Alive. That is a very reputable organization. And of course, anyone can Google search and find something reputable. There's many avenues for donating. So, and we're talking about humanitarian causes. People need help. They need food immediately. Weapons are essential. Our Ukrainian heroes are comprised of military forces as well as average citizens, as you know, and this is not an unlimited amount of ammunition. David and Goliath, David needs more bullets, we need more body armor, we need air defense, we need a NATO.
Let me just ask you one last question and then we've got to leave you. You must be extremely proud of your fellow Ukrainians and the way they've reacted, the bravery they've shown.
Absolutely. It gives me so much strength. I find these last couple of days to be so hard to deal with. Seeing these pictures on the streets, seeing what my friends are having to deal with. I was lucky enough, I'm privileged enough to be able to leave Ukraine, but part of me wishes I was back there fighting the good fight on the ground.
It's been a real pleasure hearing from you. It's been an honor hearing from you. And, you know, what can I do? I commend you for the imagination and the initiative that you're showing in ways to take this fight to the Russians. And, you know, you might feel bad about the fact that you're not in Ukraine, but you're doing more damage to Russia from where you are at the moment. And it's just brilliant what you're doing. Anton, thank you very much. That's Anton telling his own story of the process of leaving his home in Kiev. You're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and Friends on GB News with me, Dominic Frisby, sitting in for Alastair. Plenty more to come. Do stay with us. But for now, we hand you over to the news and Rhiannon Jones.
Good afternoon. It's 2 minutes past 1. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. Kharkiv's governor says Ukraine is still in full control of its second largest city after Russian forces entered early this morning. Intensive rocket artillery exchanges overnight have been followed by heavy fighting in the area. The Ukrainian president announced the country is setting up a foreign legion to bring in volunteers from abroad. Volodymyr Zelensky said the night had been brutal with shelling of civilian buildings.
They are fighting against everyone. They are fighting against all living beings, against kindergartens, residential buildings, against ambulances. They use rocket artillery, missiles in city districts where there are not and never were any military facilities.
President Zelensky there. He also said Ukrainian forces had held off Russian troops advancing on the capital. That as the mayor of Kyiv confirmed there are no Russian troops in his city. Vitaly Klitschko said that in total 31 people have died in the capital since the attacks started, including 9 civilians, while 106 people have been injured. An oil terminal has been set ablaze after Russian missiles hit the Ukrainian town of Vasilikiv, southwest of the capital. Authorities have warned residents to be on alert for toxic fumes. Russian-backed separatists in Ukraine's Luhansk province claim an oil terminal's been blown up by a Ukrainian missile in the town of Rivenki. 368,000 Ukrainians have already fled for Poland, Moldova and other neighbouring countries. The United Nations is warning the number could grow to 4 million if fighting escalates further. Prime Minister Boris Johnson's confirmed the UK will take refugees fleeing the war.
Things are not going all the way of President Putin. Very far from it. The Ukrainians are fighting heroically and in some places with great success, as many of us thought they would, because they're a great country and a very brave country. But as you rightly point out, there are some terrible atrocities being committed, and there will be some very grim days ahead for Ukraine.
The Deputy Defence Minister for Ukraine says Russia has lost around 4,300 men so far in the invasion, as well as 146 tanks and 26 helicopters. Irina Discipio is the president of the Revived Soldiers of Ukraine, a US charity organising aid. She told GB News of her parents who fled Ukraine to Poland and how her brother's defending his country. She says Ukrainians are fighting with their bare hands and the invasion will incur big Russian losses.
Our privilege is that we know territory. We own our land. We know every corner. We know every house. So for Russians, it's much harder to come in and fight. That's why they're losing a lot of people. I can't believe Putin sending his own people to die, because they will die.
The Ukrainian president says he's ready for peace talks with Russia, just not in Belarus, as it served as a staging ground for the invasion. The Kremlin says a Russian delegation, including military officials and diplomats, arrived in the Belarusian city of Gomel for talks, as Ukraine declined. The G7 leaders have declared they will cut off certain Russian banks from SWIFT, the international banking messaging system. This will help prevent Russia conducting most of its financial transactions worldwide. Vicky Price from the Centre for Economics and Business Research told GB News the move could inflict a crippling economic blow on Moscow.
It will be painful for Russia, without any doubt. I mean, Russia is dependent on those exports in order to distribute the money, if you like, to the population and keep them happy. Something like 40% of all the tax revenues that Russia collects come from oil and gas, for example. I mean, that's huge. If any of that is disrupted, then, there are question marks as to how do you continue with funding the military or anything else.
Well, here in the UK, police forces in England and Wales have recorded the highest numbers of rapes since Sarah Everard's murder almost a year ago. The Office for National Statistics also recorded the second highest number of sexual offences since April last year. Ms Everard was killed by serving Met Officer Wayne Cousins in South London in March last year. And rail firms are ramping up services that had been cancelled due to COVID. Avanti West Coast and East Midlands Railway are bringing back lines cut in December and January. For those coming to London, North Wales and Chester will get a second daily service to and from the capital, and trains from Manchester and Birmingham to Euston will be doubled from Monday. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens, but now let's get back to Alastair Stewart and friends with Dominic Frisby.
Thank you, Rhiannon. I'm Dominic Frisby, standing in for Alastair Stewart until 2 p.m. And I'll be keeping you company along with friends and friendly guests. Still to come, we'll be continuing our coverage of the Ukraine crisis and speaking to a refugee who's managed to escape the capital. I'll also be speaking to this week's Good Causes guest, who will be walking an incredible 152 miles in aid of the families in East Ukraine. I'll be speaking to the chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, Tobias Ellwood MP, later in the show for his take on the Western response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Well, Calvin and George are still with me. They've had to wait a long time to get in a word. Thank you very much for your patience. And George, let's turn straight to you. I think as the news was being read, you got a message on your phone and potentially these talks in Belarus are going to go ahead.
Yes, I've only received it from a Russian source, and these need to be fact-checked. So I am not sure. But yes, apparently the peace talks may be going ahead in Minsk, in Belarus, or actually not in Minsk, but at the border. Sadly, as we know from history, Russians who invited various leaders during the Second World War for peace talks then kidnapped them and imprisoned them. Therefore, the Ukrainians should be very careful when speaking to the Russians in this current situation. But it's a good news. I think the peace talks are necessary. It's the only way that bloodshed can be prevented or at least slowed down. The Ukrainians are in a much stronger position than everybody everybody thought they would be. Russians are using so many men and so many tanks. They still have maybe 13,000 more tanks that could be sent there. They've lost about 400, but it shows you the numbers. But they haven't expected such fierce resistance. So I certainly hope that these peace talks will happen, and that may be the solution. I've heard that the Russian economy may collapse soon. The sanctions are really having an impact. There are oligarchs that are frightened because they didn't expect it. So the oligarchs were told, allegedly by Mr. Putin, that this would be maybe just a few-day, military operation that would just take over key areas and everything would be back to normal. The West is so slow with their response to everything, especially under current American leadership. It could have been a genius plan by Mr. Putin, but because the Ukrainians are fighting so fiercely and they have that support from Poland, UK, and other countries, perhaps the Russians are calculating that they may step back. I'm very positive now, and hopefully it's not a naive feeling.
I stress to our viewers that those reports about potential talks are unconfirmed, and the source is Russian. But nevertheless, if it's true, that's great stuff. OK. At this point, I'm going to bring in my guest, who is... this is the time of the week where we shine the spotlight on an individual or individuals that have gone above and beyond for those less fortunate. And this weekend's good cause is someone who has family in Ukraine, and he's taking on a 152-mile walk to raise vital funds on behalf of them and for other families in the east of the country. So I'm delighted to be joined by Dan Zenchuk. Have I pronounced that correctly, Dan?
Yeah, absolutely.
Dan, welcome to the programme. Tell us about how this project, how it came about, what your contacts are with the Ukraine. Tell us the story.
Yeah, sure. So my grandparents moved over here during the Second World War. My mum's Ukrainian, my dad's half Ukrainian, half English. So I was born here. I was born in Peterborough, where I live now, but very much brought up still in the Ukrainian way. We always follow the traditions. We eat the foods, follow the traditions.
Do you speak the language?
Follow our sporting teams. When I was younger, I used to speak fluently, and then as I've got older, and particularly as the older generation, we lost them. Sadly, I don't get to speak as much now.
You're losing the muscle.
Losing it. It's my biggest aim right now, and I've asked the Ukrainian community in Peterborough to help me kind of brush up again on the language. I mean, I did when I was at school. I did learn Russian, but obviously, in light of the situation, and for a long time now, I won't speak it out of principle. So I need to brush up on my Ukrainian again.
Now, as you do this walk, you are finding cities in the UK that begin with the letters of the Ukrainian name. Is that correct? So
yes, that's right.
So tell us what those cities are.
Yeah, so I'm currently living in Stamford in Lincolnshire. So nearest to me, there's a town called Uppingham.
We've got them on the screen.
Oh, they're on the screen. Okay.
You can see
yeah, so I go from Uppingham to Kettering to Rugby to Ashby-de-la-Zouch to Ilkeston to Newark and back to Empingham. So it's 152 miles, as you say. The shortest day is 13 miles and the longest day is 36 miles. And that's the last day, so it's a real big challenge after having done 5.
And are you? When does the actual walk take place?
28th of March through to the 2nd of April.
Very good. And have you got all sorts of social media and that kind of coverage?
Yeah, absolutely. So 3 to 4 weeks ago now, in anticipation of the situation escalating in Ukraine, there's a group of Ukrainians in the UK. We set up a group, an appeal called Support Ukraine UK. We set up a Facebook page, and we've got team members around the country who are acting as coordinators, collating aid, and also we've got a Just Giving page as well. So off the back of that, I then set up Walk for Ukraine, which is the separate page for my walk and obviously my individual effort towards this appeal as well.
I know this. I think I'm a third generation Italian, so I'm actually only a quarter Italian. But I know that while my mother had contact with relations in Italy, I've got relations in Italy, but I've lost, with the passage of time, I'm no longer in contact. Are you still in contact with relations in Ukraine? Are you speaking to them? Are you hearing from the, on the ground? How's that?
Yeah, so I've got, my family all originate from towns and villages close to Lviv. So they're very much over in the west. I guess we assumed before this started they would be safe. But then, you know, Russia's bombing so far has been a bit sporadic. They've not just stuck to the eastern front. Obviously, they've gone for Kiev as well. And certainly the air raid sirens have gone off a few times in Lviv. The person I speak to the most is actually one of our appeal team members who lives in Lviv. So he receives the aid from us the other end and helps with distributing. He's still quite calm at the moment, still quite optimistic. They have applied some curfews in Lviv as well, though, so he has been quite housebound in the last few days as well. But, you know, on the ground, it seems that spirits are still quite high. I think we've seen already, you know, and it's hard. I was listening in earlier on, you know, you hear the stories from the ground on both sides and what do you believe and what you don't. But certainly some of the things we've seen from the Ukrainian people and just how resilient we are has been really, really pleasing.
It really does seem like Russia's made a number of strategic errors, and we'll come and talk to you gents about that in a second. Do you have a sort of target amount of money that you're hoping to raise? Is there a too good to be true number and an actual realistic target?
I'll be honest, we're already there. So Support Ukraine UK Appeal, we set that up, I'd say 3 weeks ago, we set up the financial side of that. We were already collecting aid, we've already shipped aid to Lviv, and we set an initial goal, I think it was £2,000. As of this morning, we were up to around the £8,000 mark. And then for my walk, I set an initial target of £1,000. I'm just under £3,000 as of this morning. And the group, the Support Ukraine UK group that we have, as of, I think it was Wednesday when the attack started, we had about 200-300 members. We've now got 4,000 and another 4,000 waiting to join as well. So the numbers have gone up really quick. The support's been really good. I think the thing that means so much to us is that a lot of the people that have been offering to help and support are not just Ukrainians here, but the British people. We've got, where I am in Peterborough, we're doing a lot through St Olga's Church, which is our community in Peterborough. And we've had the Polish community, the Lithuanian community coming to the church, donating items. We've even had people offering to take cars and vans themselves and drive the aid to the border. And it's just been amazing the last couple of days. The support's been fantastic.
That's amazing. Let's hope we can add a zero to those figures.
Oh, that'd be fantastic.
George, you were telling me in the break there about something similar taking place in Poland and how the Poles have just been doing everything they can to help refugees. Tell us a bit about that.
Yes, so I myself have been contacted by so many people over the last few days. Could you help me with a transport from this city to another? I've been connecting people. There are businesses that are moving out. Just imagine after COVID, you're trying to get back, get your business back together, and then you're hit with a war, with an invasion of Russia. So it's been very tough. I went to some protests outside of Downing Street as well, very well organized. Thousands and thousands of Ukrainian, British people together, just raising awareness. There were many Polish flags, British flags of support. It was really remarkable. I know that the White Eagle Club in Balham in London is collecting items today that will be sent to the Ukrainian refugees. And in Poland, there is such a massive organizational effort by almost everybody. I go on Facebook, Instagram. My friends are just putting advertisements. Who wants to stay for free? I have a room, I have a car, I can use it. Businesses are promoting people. It's really remarkable how many people are trying to help and save the Ukrainians.
OK, thank you, George. Calvin, I know you're closely in contact with the church and you work with a number of church organisations. What kind of things are you seeing on the ground?
Well, similar to what Dan's doing. I think that's very commendable, by the way, Dan. And on the way home from here yesterday, actually, I saw a big protest outside the Russian embassy. What sparked my imagination is the fact that so many people are being charitable. The humanity that's coming out of this horrible situation is very commendable all across the board of everyday citizens that are getting involved in giving and supporting in aid. And we mentioned earlier the Bitcoin options as opposed to the fiat options. Bitcoin fixes this.
It really does. They're not going to do a GoFundMe and steal the, if the truckers had donated in Bitcoin, that GoFundMe thing wouldn't have happened. Dan, thank you so much for joining us. Do you want to leave us with a couple of final thoughts before you head on your way, before you head on your walking way? You got some new walking boots?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've brought quite a bit of new kit. Obviously, going to start training really hard in the next few weeks, but. All I can say is, thank you for having me today and thank you to the media this week. I've been telling friends and family it's so important this week that we're seen and heard right now. You know, we've got world leaders announcing sanctions. We've got people wanting to help. And, you know, the more they can see Ukrainian people and what it means to us and what's actually going on, I think that's really, really important. And, yeah, massive thank you to yourselves and to the public in the last few days that have been so generous in supporting us. It's been amazing.
No, Dan, thank you. Dan Zenchuk, founder of Walk for Ukraine and team member of Support Ukraine UK. Now, plenty more to come this afternoon on Alastair Stewart and Friends. I'm Dominic Frisby. I'm standing in for Alastair, who's taking a break. After the break, our reporter Rachel Sweeney speaks to cybersecurity expert Matt Hewison about the possibility of Russian cyber attacks. But first, let's take a look at the weather.
Looking ahead to this afternoon, the UK is looking dry for many this lunchtime, although some rain will affect the far west. Let's take a look at the details. In the southwest, many places will be dry with some sunshine. Parts of Cornwall and West Devon will be cloudier with perhaps the odd spot of rain. Heading over to the southeast of England and East Anglia, apart from a little fair weather cloud, it'll be dry with plenty of sunshine. Western Wales will tend to see more in the way of cloud this afternoon, but East Wales and the Midlands will be dry and sunny. A little cloud may move into Irish Sea coast from time to time, otherwise lots of sunshine this afternoon across northwest England. It'll be breezy though, especially over the hills and fells. The breeze will also be noticeable along the North Sea coast, which will make it feel rather chilly, sheltered from the wind inland, and in the sunshine, though, it'll feel fairly pleasant. Heading into Scotland and southern and eastern areas should see a largely sunny afternoon. Elsewhere, though, it will be cloudier with some rain across the northwest, winds also strengthening in the far west. Across into Northern Ireland, and skies should begin to brighten this afternoon, especially towards the west. Many places will be dry, although the odd spot of rain is still possible. This evening will remain dry and clear in the east, but further cloud and rain will begin to spread into the west. And that's how the weather's shaping up for the rest of the day.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. It is 1:24 or 13:24, depending on which time system you prefer. You're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and Friends on GB News with me, Dominic Frisby, standing in for Alastair today. Now, the Russian invasion of Ukraine increases the possibility of a cyber war. The Sunday Telegraph today reports a cyber chief saying that Vladimir Putin could sabotage everyday British life through online hacking? What are the chances of a global cyber conflict, and how could it affect us in the UK? Let's now speak to Will Gyatt, technology journalist and social media expert. Will, hello. I think there's been sort of an ongoing cyber war, but I guess it intensifies now. Is that a correct assessment?
Yeah, the challenge with the phrase cyber war is it could start from cash points not working, and it can go all the way through to somebody willfully forcing a nuclear reactor to overload. There is a wide scale. If you're saying cyber warfare, the general way to describe it is anything that can be controlled over the internet, which is most of our modern infrastructure, most of our food, for example, all that will be organized. The shipping of that will be organised through the internet, fuel shipments, etc. That can be tampered with online through a cyber war. So anything we can do to the Russians can do to us. And then you've got people like the Chinese, you've got the North Koreans. There are cyber forces all around the world now. And back in 2007, the Americans successfully used an early piece of cyber warfare, a thing called Stuxnet, on an Iranian nuclear reactor and the centrifugal process in that to create the fuel they essentially wanted to make missiles. This made it spin too quickly, and as a result of that, the Iranian nuclear program was put back by a number of years. So it's possible, it's real, and it's happening.
Yes. I noticed the Kremlin website has gone down, and I tried to check on it this morning and see if it was working, and I was unable to check it. I'm presuming it's still down, and it wasn't just my internet connection. So are we winning the cyber war if we've been able to take out the Kremlin website? Presumably it was somebody on our team.
I'm thinking it's amateurs that have done the Kremlin website. A number of organizations, cyber organizations not affiliated to any government, took credit for it. That was a simple brute force attack on a website. Lots of these happen. The big concern when countries and states do these brute force denial of service attacks, it's what's going on behind that. It's the noisiest, loudest method of doing some kind of cyber attack, but it's what's going on behind that. So they might be knocking on the front door, but what are they doing around the back of that particular website, or checking in terms of the sort of cyber infrastructure? The thing for me about this is interesting. We have a pretty good cyber warfare team in the UK. GCHQ have been building that cyber defense. But like I said, places like North Korea, who can't necessarily afford to conventional arms, missiles, etc., they have been investing really heavily in these kind of cyber warfare forces. And it sounds weird to say it now when we've got a conflict in Europe, but we go back a few years, it was the North Koreans that managed to hack Sony Pictures in the US, leaking a number of films and essentially getting Barack Obama in the US involved as a result of this sort of cyber attack on a large corporation. So like I said, cyber warfare is very much sort of a sliding scale. It can be the cash point not working in your local town through to something very serious. I mean, the US have had, last week, this was angrily denied by the White House, but NBC News put out a report that Joe Biden had been given a shopping list of potential activities they could use in the sphere of cyber warfare. It was everything from delaying fuel shipments from Russia to stop them getting into the Ukraine to refuel weapons and vehicles, through to actually derailing tanks in the Ukraine, sorry, not tanks, trains in the Ukraine. So if a train was on the track, they could change the points and they could potentially derail the train. And then there was more serious than that. So there are many, many measures that can be taken in cyber warfare because it's new and it's largely untested. The big fear is what happens if somebody does this. Is it going to start escalating? Are we going to see, in the same way as you see in conventional warfare, could a cyber attack lead to mass escalation? Could it lead to the Russians attacking the UK, etc., etc.? It's something that's very new and untested.
I've got you. Thank you. And are there any precautions we should be taking as individuals?
Yeah, it's tricky because most of this is done at a level above us. But if you're a business or an organization, I would recommend making sure you've got all of your systems patched and updated. I know it's annoying when Windows asks you to do the update, but if you do all of those updates, you are actually protecting yourself from many of the malware attacks and hacks that can come from these sorts of things. If you go back to 2017, when we had the big attack on the NHS with something called WannaCry, which was malware that stopped the NHS from operating, testing, that hit computers that were not correctly updated. And ultimately, that cost $10 billion globally to fix that particular problem. And the malware that caused that was originally created to target Ukrainian computers.
Good stuff. Thank you very much, Will. And I will duly go home and update all the software on my computer and on my phone. That's technology journalist Will Guyat. Thank you for your time. Our North East of England reporter Rachel Sweeney has been speaking to an expert this week on this very same topic.
Because of the sanctions that the UK has placed on Russia, it's time to talk about cybersecurity and how the UK could be affected because Russia has invaded Ukraine. Joining me now is Matt Hewison from Cyber White. Are we ready for an attack?
Putin has made a real strong, aggressive action. I think where the UK need to be concerned is by considering the capability that Russia have, and in particular Putin has, in terms of launching a cyber attack on the UK. So Putin worked for the KGB as an intelligence officer for 16 years, and during that time he's obviously acquired a lot of skills and abilities to be able to formulate the perfect storm with regards to pushing for a cyber attack. Since 2016, the Cabinet Office has really beefed up their cybersecurity strategy, and as a result has worked very, very hard with people in key industries that are connected to the critical national infrastructure, and other areas, so finance, for example, helping them to be more robust and resilient within their cybersecurity defence.
What advice do you have to our viewers and listeners to keep themselves safe in the cyber world?
Everything that we do in terms of lifestyle now usually incorporates the internet or a smart handheld phone or device. What I would urge people to do is to go and seek advice from their employers. Is it a phishing attack? Is it something that comes via an email? If you don't work in a business where the whole cyber piece is available to individuals, then I would urge people to maybe look on the internet and have a look at the NCSC website. It gives some really good advice at a corporate and individual level.
That's great advice there from Matt Hewison from Cyber White. Thank you for watching.
That was our North East of England reporter Rachel Sweeney there. You're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and Friends. I'm Dominic Frisby, standing in for Alastair. After the break, I'm going to be talking to Tobias Ellwood, MP, to get his insights on the Ukraine conflict. It is 13:33, and now it's time for the news.
Thanks, Dominic. It's 1:33. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. Vladimir Putin has put nuclear deterrent forces on high alert amid tensions with NATO over Ukraine. It's after G7 leaders declared they'll cut off some Russian banks from SWIFT, the international banking messaging system. This will help prevent Russia from conducting most of its financial transactions worldwide. Kharkiv's governor says Ukraine is still in full control of its second largest city after Russian forces entered early this morning. Intensive rocket artillery exchanges overnight have been followed by heavy fighting in the area. Ukraine's president says Ukrainian forces have held off Russian troops advancing on the capital. That as the mayor of Kiev confirmed there are no Russian troops in his city. Vitaly Klitschko said that in total 31 people have died in the capital since the attacks started, including 9 civilians, while 106 have been injured. An oil terminal has been set ablaze after Russian missiles hit the Ukrainian town of Vasilikiv, southwest of the capital. Authorities have warned residents to be on alert for toxic fumes. Russian-backed separatists in Ukraine's Luhansk province claim an oil terminal's been blown up by a Ukrainian missile in the town of Ravenki. 368,000 Ukrainians have already fled for Poland, Moldova and other neighbouring countries. The United Nations is warning the number could grow to 4 million if fighting escalates further. Prime Minister Boris Johnson has confirmed the UK will take refugees fleeing the war. And Niagara Falls has been lit up in support of Ukraine. The waterfall on the US-Canada border has been illuminated in blue and yellow, creating an orange-coloured mist. It's one of several landmarks around the world to be lit up in the colours of the Ukrainian flag as a show of solidarity for its people. TV online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. We're back at the top of the hour with a full update. It's back to Alastair Stewart and Friends with Dominic Frisby in just a moment.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. It is 13:37. You're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and Friends on GB News with me, Dominic Frisby, sitting in for Alastair, who is taking some well-deserved time off. It is day 4 of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and there are developments every few minutes. Residents in the Ukrainian capital, Kiev, have been ordered to stay indoors until Monday morning as Russian forces close in on the city. This comes as in the last hour, President Putin has ordered Russia's nuclear deterrent forces to be on alert. Let's speak through the latest developments now with Conservative MP and Chair of the Commons Defence Select Committee, Tobias Ellwood. Tobias, hello. Thank you very much for joining us, Tobias. Tell us, what's your assessment of things so far?
I think the first thing we must do is praise the Ukrainian people. I mean, what stoicism, what determination that we're seeing. Everybody's watching this thanks to social media. As you was just implying, every few minutes there's a new development which we're able to digest and try and understand and pick through. But President Zelensky has also been fantastic in rallying his own country and stepping forward and showing that he's really quite an inspirational war leader, and he should be credited with that. But clearly, the Russian timetable is not working, and that's why we're seeing perhaps in a sense of almost panic by Putin in suggesting it's now firstly time for talks. That seems a bit premature given that it's only day 4, and now almost referencing the nuclear deterrent as if to somehow get us to become rattled, to intimidate us and so forth. We need to stand firm. We need to hold our ground. We need to remain committed on the 2 parts of our strategy, which must be to support the Ukrainian people on one side, provide them with the hard power, the soft power humanitarian support that they require. And then secondly, every day, we should look at other ways to place pressure on Russia, to isolate Russia, to make sure Russia understands that what it's doing is completely out of order and it will not be tolerated by the rest of the world.
Do you worry that because Plan A for Russia perhaps hasn't gone as well as they were hoping, and because of the nature of Putin and to a certain extent the nature of Russia as a result is that, Russia doesn't lose, because of that, the warfare is going to get more dirty, get bigger, get more aggressive, get nuclear even?
Yes, we need to brace ourselves for that. We've had incredible results. The Ukrainians themselves all stepping forward. They've certainly hampered the Russian timetable, but we must brace ourselves for an escalation in this war. My concern is, as you imply, it's not beyond Putin to stoop to radical tactics to secure victory. He cannot afford to fail. And we need to ask ourselves those very, very difficult questions. At what point does the international community continue to watch from afar? We've benched the our NATO deterrent from outside. They've shored up the NATO family of membership, but we've yet to actually set foot in the country itself. Understandable why that decision has been made. There was a call that I made 6 months ago to say we should have sent troops in. But ultimately, as things are moving very, very fast, you have to ask yourselves, what is Putin trying to achieve here? Where will he go to next if we don't step in?
What did you make of Foreign Secretary Liz Truss's comments this morning about this conflict potentially going on for 10 years?
I'd like to see more about that analysis, that assessment. What I would say is I think we're experiencing a turning point in our history at the moment. What we're seeing is we've entered a dark chapter in European affairs. State-on-state open warfare is returning to Europe again. We've not seen that since 1968 with tanks rolling into Czechoslovakia. And we're now appreciating and realizing that what happens in Ukraine actually affects the rest of European security and stability as well. But I'll go further than that to say that the last 30 years that, I think you and I are old enough to remember the Cold War, but, we've been lucky. We've been fortunate this peacetime period. That isn't the norm. And the world is now resorting to type, if you like, where authoritarian states are willing to use brute force to further their own agenda. And during that last 30 years, we have become a little risk averse, a little timid, a little, perhaps forgetting what it takes to stand up to defend our values. So there's an awful amount of regrouping that needs to take place. Confirmation that, yes, we need to be more resolute in defending our hard-fought standards and values.
How concerned are you about China's silence on this and the existence of a possible sort of tacit alliance between China and Russia, a sort of anti-Western alliance, if you like?
I think that's the biggest question here. Firstly, you ask yourselves, what is Putin trying to achieve here? He's looking for a legacy. He recognizes the West doesn't like him. He doesn't like the West either. He certainly doesn't like Ukraine with all its prosperity, its openness, transparency, its democracy, rubbing up right against Russia. The Russian people were looking over their shoulders and saying, why don't we have any of that? Well, you don't have any of that because you've got a leader that rules through fear, that won't allow any form of reform. His one trump card is oil and gas. He knows that. He realizes if he attacks Ukraine, brings Ukraine back down to a more basic level, then that will be less of a threat. Won't be able to join NATO, won't be able to join the EU. And of course, China can pick up where things break down with the West. So there's trade deals, oil and gas sales, and so forth. And of course, President Xi, President Putin share a mutual dislike of the West.
I don't know if you have heard that Putin has recently said that anti-war protesters in Russia are now guilty of treason. You mentioned the word authoritarian. What do you make of that?
I think it's really important. We did this in the Iraq war and the problems in Syria. Britain was very good at providing the collection point for all the evidence of every war crime that took place. I'd encourage the government to re-establish that. All sorts of footage that you've been showing on every single street and so forth. every single sergeant, every single major, every single colonel, every single general that's working with Russia now should know that they could end up in The Hague one day for what they are doing. But the only way that we can provide that evidence is if the recordings are collated and assembled in one location. I'd like Britain to do what it did in Iraq and be that point of collection. So all this information is dated and assembled, kept ready for when we actually have an opportunity to hold these people, not just in the Kremlin, but also those that are on the ground in Ukraine, to account.
Great stuff. Well, Tobias, thank you very much for giving us some of your afternoon, and we'll leave it there. Please join us again soon and enjoy the rest of your afternoon. That was Tobias Ellwood, MP, Conservative Chair of the Commons Defence Select Committee and MP for Bournemouth East. Let me bring my two ever-patient guests back into the conversation. And we began this programme about comparing the Russian and the Ukrainian army, one conscripted, bad communication, the other voluntary, amateur, if you like, but doing, with much more at stake. One of the observations that Putin made before this war is how divided the West is, and it's something we've all observed in our own little spheres. But bizarrely, this invasion of the Ukraine, in the space of just 2 or 3, 4 days, has, in a funny kind of way, united the West. What are your observations about that? Well, Calvin, you go first. It's your turn.
It might have divided us. It might have united us, but it has also shown how weak we are.
Yeah.
So Western armies have been neglected for decades. We've been reliant on the US as the big boy in the playground. And now that the US has taken an America First stance, who is there to protect Europe? European countries, the European Union itself have kind of neglected their armies. Germany is reliant on Russia for a whole host of reasons, including their energy and fuel. And in the UK, our army is abysmal compared to what it used to be. We need to, if anything, we learn from this situation is that we need to bolster our military prowess.
Yeah, and it's not just the military. It's everything. It's resources. It's everything.
For so long, people have been saying, yes, but we don't need armies, we don't need tanks, we don't need fighter jets, because everything is going to be cyber warfare in the future. And of course we do.
There's no battle between two countries that have a McDonald's.
Well, indeed. But I mean, I'm a computer scientist by trade. That was my first degree. And I completely get that we will need to fight on the cyber warfare front and also watch that space, because the WF have been talking about that. So we need to keep a close eye on what's happening in cyber. But the wars won't always be fought on cyber, and not only on cyber. We still need tanks. We still need fighter jets. We can't provide, we can't provide a no-fly zone over the Ukraine because we literally cannot man it at the moment.
What are your thoughts, George?
Well, may I just first applaud what Tobias Ellwood said. He's been talking about these issues for years, together with Daniel Kawczyński, the Polish-born MP, Julian Lewis, head of the Intelligence Committee. For many years, they were protesting against Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline. I remember 5 years ago, they were collecting signatures of MPs, raising this issue and saying that this will be weaponized. Yeah. Gas will be weaponized. And unfortunately, our leaders at that time, many other politicians said, no, this is just trade. We can, trade with Russia. And of course, trade is good, but that particular pipeline was so dangerous. And many years after, it's confirmed that Mr. Putin and Mr. Lukashenko, they're using every possible way to influence and intimidate European nations. Yeah. So one of the reasons why Europe is so divided still is because there is so much pressure and scaremongering from Russia on those countries. Austria takes 100% of its gas from Russia. Germany, 60%. Many European countries take a majority of their gas from Russia. They are also scared that if they just put too heavy sanctions against Putin, it will hurt their own people. So
we should, don't they? They're compromised nations.
Yes, to some extent they're compromised nations. And the debate in Germany now is fascinating because for the last 30 years, they were sort of moving away from coal, moving away from nuclear and trying to be that gas hub, make these trade deals with Moscow. But they are realizing now what a mistake they made, because if they keep on following Energiewende, which is this sort of energy project that they've had despite leadership changes in Germany, they wanted to be that gas gas hub and build renewables. That's positive, but they are now supporting war crimes if they would be compliant. So Germany is changing its policy of 30 years. It's quite incredible, and I hope that Europe will wake up. And we just need to be, we just need the solidarity right now to stop Putin.
We need to do the same thing, don't we? We're obsessed with net zero. We're obsessed with these carbon targets. We need to scrap that. We need to reopen the coal mines. We need to start fracking. The reason we're not fracking in this country is because of Russian propaganda in the first place.
I'm just going to interrupt you, Calvin, because we're seeing some pictures of the Polish-Ukraine border here. And these are live pictures, people crossing over. And that's another thing we haven't talked about. It's cold. It's very cold there at the moment. My goodness me, that's one hell of a snowstorm going on. And so while we watch those pictures, George, let me come back to a subject we were talking to Tobias Elwood about. And is it a problem that the Ukrainian defence has gone so well? And because it's gone so well, that means Putin's going to get more aggressive and, you know, the N-word, nuclear.
Of course, there is a possibility of that, and it may worry us all that Putin may just do something unpredictable, because I think he's been desperate. In many years before, he was maneuvering in geopolitics quite well, I would say, quite smartly, you know, doing certain actions against America. But now he is making mistakes. He is in this conflict that will embarrass Russia. I mean, we need to speak about Russian citizens as well. I speak to Russians that are terrified of Mr. Putin's actions, and they don't know what to do. And now we've been also told that those who supported the Ukrainian organizations helping refugees are considered traitors, and they may not be able to come back to Russia. It's just frightening, and Mr. Putin has been threatening Finland, Sweden. It's just, we really need some sort of a unified response. But I think this is happening. And just coming back to Calvin's point before, we need that to be independent in terms of energy. This is so crucial. I hope this debate even about fracking needs to come back, because one thing is saving the environment, and we should be doing everything possible to help and support the environment. But the second thing is we need to be independent, therefore not allow a war happening in our doorstep.
Yeah.
And it can very easily move from Ukraine elsewhere.
I'll bet you UK-produced gas is done in a more environmentally sensitive way than it is in Russia. I don't know why I think that, but it's just a suspicion. There are so many ways that this can go. We had Konstantin Kisin, the Russian commentator, on the show yesterday, and he was describing this invasion of the Ukraine in terms of the repercussions as big as 9/11, bigger than 9/11. In terms of the way geopolitics are going to unfold over the next 10 years. And I can see this, you know, going one way. The net result is World War III and some enormous Russian-China alliance and the downfall of the West. But I can also see it going the other way, and this, you know, the repercussion, it meaning the downfall of Putin and Russia going bankrupt for the second time in 30 or 40 years. Do you have a sort of long picture of how this ends? I'll ask you first, Calvin.
I think we're seeing America get smaller and smaller. We're seeing the European nations get smaller and smaller, especially as they're combined with the EU. And we're seeing Russia and China get bigger and bigger. Russia's proving itself to be a global force to be reckoned with. It has the military might that no other nation other than China has. China itself is going to be a strong ally for Russia as we put more and more sanctions on Russia. Russia's going to look to China for support economically. And we, likewise, the West is going to be looking at China to put pressure on Russia. So they are going to become the gatekeepers of the world and probably the next big superpower. So yeah, the whole global picture is changing.
What's your view?
And so appeasing Putin is certainly a wrong way to go, because I've heard these comments, let him just take parts of Ukraine, and now people are saying, let him take Ukraine. This is certainly not the way, because if you appease somebody, they will always want more. The reason why he may want to, well, he wants to take Kiev is because we've allowed him. People believed he would just take these little bits in eastern Ukraine, but he's not doing that. He's taking as much as he can, because we in the West are so weak. Next Could be Moldova, who knows? The Baltic states, yes, of course, they are in NATO and we believe in the unity of NATO and Article 5, etc. But if he would be able to take one of the small Baltic countries within a day, how would we react? There would be people saying, oh, let's not have a nuclear war. And then after these countries, there could be Poland and it could move into... Yes, so it's a very wrong sort of approach that I know some people have, and we need to change that. The stronger we are right now, the more united we are, it will prevent further conflicts, and I hope it's happening.
You heard, George, that Anton, the guy who spoke earlier in the programme, and he was talking about all the measures we need to do and how quickly we need to do them. You're kind of you're taking the same argument.
Yes, I certainly think so. The Ukrainians are calling, for example, for the sky to be sheltered. And we've done that in Libya, we've done it in certain countries. That's one of the things that could help Ukrainians enormously.
OK, thank you very much, George Brzezinski, Calvin Robinson. It's been a pleasure having you on the show. Thanks for your great insights and your articulacy. That is all we have time for today. Alistair's going to be back next weekend at 12 o'clock on Saturday. I've been Dominic Frisby. What a pleasure it's been hosting this show on Alistair's behalf. And enjoy the rest of your day. Cheerio.
Looking ahead to this afternoon, the UK is looking dry for many this lunchtime, although some rain will affect the far west. Let's take a look at the details. In the southwest, many places will be dry with some sunshine. Parts of Cornwall and West Devon will be cloudier with perhaps the odd spot of rain. Heading over to the southeast of England and East Anglia, apart from a little fair weather cloud, it'll be dry with plenty of sunshine. Western Wales will tend to see more in the way of cloud this afternoon, but East Wales and the Midlands will be dry and sunny. A little cloud may move into Irish Sea coast from time to time, otherwise lots of sunshine this afternoon across northwest England. It'll be breezy though, especially over the hills and fells. The breeze will also be noticeable along the North Sea coast, which will make it feel rather chilly, sheltered from the wind inland, and in the sunshine, though, it'll feel fairly pleasant. Heading into Scotland and southern and eastern areas should see a largely sunny afternoon. Elsewhere, though, it will be cloudier with some rain across the northwest, winds also strengthening in the far west. Across into Northern Ireland, and skies should begin to brighten this afternoon, especially towards the west. Many places will be dry, although the odd spot of rain is still possible. This evening will remain dry and clear in the east, but further cloud and rain will begin to spread into the west, and that's how the weather's shaping up for the rest of the day.
Join me, Nana Akweer, on Fridays, Saturdays and Sunday afternoons here on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as my panel and I take on some of the top stories hitting the headlines.
You can look up the statistics.
No, you look it up. I hug everyone. We learn from it and try and move on. That's it. Opinion is at the heart of the show. It's a place for open and frank conversation, but without the fear of cancellation. So join me here on GB News on Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoons between 4 and 6 p.m.
Join me, Darren Grimes, for Real Britain every Saturday and Sunday from 2 p.m. A news hour that comes with a trigger warning. Scorching hot opinion with prominent guests saying the unsayable and a little bit of weekend fun thrown in. Unlike other broadcasters, I won't be forgetting what the B in our name stands for. So howie in for Real Britain Saturday and Sunday from 2 p.m.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello and welcome. I'm Darren Grimes and you're watching and listening to Real Britain. We'll be getting the latest on the Ukraine invasion and what impact it's had in the world of sport. But first, it's the news with Rhiannon Jones.
Thanks, Darren. Good afternoon. It's 2 o'clock. Here are your top stories in the GB newsroom. Negotiations between Ukraine and Russia are to go ahead and will be held at the border between Belarus